Welcome to the layer-by-layer poetic features for Psalm 11. Our goal is to reveal the distinctive beauty and power of the original text of Psalm 11 as the next best thing to knowing Hebrew yourself. The three poetic features are called first, birds and traps, second, fire, and third, face to face. We'll begin with birds and traps. The psalm opens with bird imagery that may sound strange to modern ears. Flee from your mountain, birds! In the ancient Near East, bird imagery refers to siege warfare. The psalm closes with a reference to bird traps coming down on the wicked. David starts out like a trapped bird, but who will end up truly trapped? This is how ancient kings spoke of birds flying to mountains. Tiglath-Pileser I wrote of people who were, quote, frightened by my strong, belligerent attack and abandoned their territory. They flew like birds to ledges on high mountains. Sennacherib writes of the city Ukku, frightened by his battle array, whose population, quote, had flown away like birds to the peak of a rugged mountain. Most famously, Sennacherib also speaks of Hezekiah, whom, quote, I locked up within Jerusalem, his royal city, like a bird in a cage. I surrounded him with armed posts and made it unthinkable for him to exit by the city gate. We can see that when people advise David to flee like a bird, it's an exhortation to act out of fear, giving up hope of defending his place and instead yielding his ground to the enemy. That's the dominant image at the beginning of the psalm. As a side note, the Hebrew is ambiguous about whether it is fleeing to a mountain or from a mountain. This may be another poetic touch. The standard imagery of siege is of a bird fleeing to a mountain, but this is addressed to David, who would have to flee from Mount Zion, his rightful home. Both would be legitimate. For David to accept the advice, he would be abandoning Mount Zion out of fear, yielding to his enemies. Passing over the middle, at the end of the psalm, we have a wish that the fate of Sodom and Gomorrah, judgment of fire and brimstone, would befall the wicked. Commonly included with the fire and brimstone are coals. In the Hebrew text, we find the word pecham, which sounds an awful lot like coals, pachim, but actually means bird traps. The Psalms love reversals. When the fate feared by the righteous ends up befalling the wicked, or when the delights stolen by the wicked are handed over to the righteous. In this case, woven into the fire and brimstone are bird traps, which reverses the identity of the one like trapped birds. Instead of David, it's the wicked who are like birds, whom the Lord himself is trapping. Insult is added to injury when the judgment of Sodom and Gomorrah grows to not just threaten destruction to the wicked, but also to mock them as falling prey to the very fate they had intended for David. The next poetic feature is fire, which is a powerful image in Psalm 11. This fire has a dramatically different effect on people, depending on whether they fall into the camp of the righteous or the wicked. The first half of the psalm is the impending danger of a siege about to succeed. But in the second half, fire dominates. When God tests humans and refines the righteous person, this is language from metallurgy and the process of refining metals. This was common imagery for the idea of purity and purification, as seen in Psalm 12, in which God's words are like silver refined in a furnace, purified 7 times over. Here in Psalm 11, it is all people who are being subjected to the fire. From the first half of the psalm, It's clear that David has advisors who have given up on the Lord delivering them. Their advice is to flee. There is no hope even for the righteous. The Lord does not seem to be engaged. David's response is a direct rebuke to this idea that the Lord is no longer intervening for his people. Instead, the Lord is actively observing people and testing them, in the metallurgical sense of subjecting them to the fire to see what impurities will be revealed and can be removed. When in the fire, impurities will be separated from the pure metal and be burnt up, whereas the metal will come out purified and therefore improved. David is likening the current trials to the refining fire. The righteous need not fear, because for them the fire is only to refine. It is the wicked who should fear, because the Lord hates them, and the fire will mean only destruction for them. Fire, brimstone, and scorching wind, fire at its most destructive. The final poetic feature is one that recurs in the Psalms. The final verse draws together words appearing all throughout the psalm in a kind of grand finale. The key words not included are as instructive as those that are. Verse 7 reads, "For the Lord is righteous, he loves righteous acts. The upright people will look at his face." The name of the Lord has already appeared 4 times in the psalm, the word righteous twice. Loves appeared in verse 5 and upright in verse 2. Look at or observe was in verse 4. The same word for face does not show up, but eyes and eyelids are present in verse 4. What is most notable is the double appearance of the word righteous in verse 7, and the absence of any mention of the wicked, or of testing, or refining. The psalm opened with David seeking refuge in the Lord, but his advisors rejecting all hope and instead advising flight. To their mind, the allegedly righteous people had done something to make the Lord no longer provide refuge, but instead permit the enemies to overcome them. In verse 4, David insists that the Lord has not abandoned his people, but instead is actively testing to know who is righteous and who is not. The righteous only experience the fire for the sake of refining. The wicked experience the fire as judgment and destruction. This final verse sums it all up. It is the Lord who is righteous and who is competent to judge who is and who is not righteous. He loves, meaning he is committed to, righteous acts. No one ever need fear that he has given up on the righteous, because he is fully committed to what is righteous. Because the Lord is the righteous one, it means that the fate of the upright is secure. The missing words repeated elsewhere in the psalm are wicked and testing, for both are done away with by this point. In the place of the wicked, the word righteous is found twice, as if refinement eliminates that distinction, and those who last are only the righteous people who genuinely do righteous acts. After the Lord has observed, examined them, and refined them in the fire, their reward is that they will now observe or look at the Lord. This is not a common word. It has connotations of perceiving with deep insight as a seer, or revelation, or experience. First, the Lord will thoroughly examine people, and those who come forth as upright will then be able to do the same back to the Lord, to examine, as in thoroughly experience his face. As a baby or a lover gazing into the face of a loved one, so the upright will be able to gaze into the face of the Lord himself. That sums up the reward of the one who makes it through the testing. This has been the Poetic Features video for Psalm 11. in which we explore the natively Hebrew poetic nature of the psalm. Our overview video provides a coherent interpretation of the psalm, and our exegetical issues video discusses other scholarly views. All of these videos are offered free of charge, thanks to the generosity of our donors. Please visit us at cdbr.org to learn more.